Welcome back for another episode of Six Rotations. Here with you. He's Mick. I'm Daniel. Let's get right into the fun stuff. Once again, we're always brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, we have one more week until the 10-week war that is conference play commences. But before we get into what is maybe the best midweek matchups here this season, we've got some great matchups from last week to talk about. And you know what? We're going to get to the poll in a minute. 1 and 2 stay the same. I don't want to have to keep you any suspense-filled. Texas 1, Nebraska 2. But how about the incredible attendance on Wednesday in Omaha, right? The largest attendance in the history of an NCAA volleyball match. Creighton puts on a show and forces 5. It was as expected and maybe better than expected, for the fans, except maybe the changeover from Fox Sports 1 to Fox Sports 2.
Yeah, that was disappointing. I think that was very disappointing. But I enjoyed the match. I thought Creighton made a mistake after they exposed Nebraska on the tips. They didn't come out swinging in the fifth, so Nebraska got back into the match. But boy, 16,000 people almost. What a wonderful match.
Yeah, 15,797 people. It would be Nebraska's 13th largest city if just the attendance there at the Shy Health Center, which is where we will be at the end of December for a great Final Four. And by the way, we've changed some things up, right? Mick is in Michigan right now at a winery. Walk us through kind of what your trip is and how you're doing out there.
Well, we've been in Michigan for probably 5 days now. We were trying to run a program where we would get all the Michigan junior colleges to start men's volleyball. And we had a big meeting in Battle Creek, the home of the Kellogg Community College men's team that I actually coached in the 70s. A lot of the players showed up. They were really good. We had a lot of support to get started. A lot of Michigan JC people tuned in to the program. It will be on the internet, Daniel, so everybody can listen to what we're doing. But we're offering $10,000 grants to each Michigan school that will start men's volleyball through the First Point Volleyball Foundation. After such a busy weekend, and they made me ride around on the golf court for 18 holes.
They made him, folks.
I'm taking a little bit of a vacation here in northern Michigan, and the wineries are unbelievably good. I never thought they would be this good. I'm at Bowers Harbor Winery right now doing this, and up in Traverse City, and boy, it's a wonderful experience with the exception of rain. And we never get rain in Texas, so I love it.
Well, we got rain out here in Central California. It was 107 degrees last week. We've been managing. I did get some stuff up on the walls. I've had some people chirp at me here in the last few weeks. So we got a cool picture from myself broadcasting at Holloway Gym and a little bit of a Masters tribute there. But you see Mick's polo. We're starting to shape into a real show out here, and we're consistently giving all you guys some content. A little bit more about the match in Omaha before we jump into the polls, though. Ready for this? 250,000 viewers on Fox Sports 1, which was more than the people who watched the baseball game that they transferred it over to at the end of the fourth set. Complete garbage. It makes me one of those grinding your gears kind of things. But how about Hayden Kubik, Maddie's little sister, comes up with the match-winning kill. Whitney Launstein had 25 kills. It was a good showing for Nebraska, and they are going to have a great test this week. We'll talk about that in a moment. Creighton did bounce back to beat Florida State in 5. And then some more midweek craziness, right? BYU gets swept by both Georgia Tech and Ohio State down in Atlanta. And then the wild Pac-12 Big Ten battle in Minnesota. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's get to the top 5, though, because 1 and 2 are going to stay the same. 3, once again, bopped down with Minnesota losing against Stanford on Saturday. They dropped out of the top 5. Wisconsin goes from 6 to 4. They looked really good in the sweep over Kentucky, and Ohio State jumps up to 5.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Ohio State might have gotten jumped a little too far, but boy, they showed some resilience in coming back after some pretty devastating starts. 0-3 to start the season, and they get to number 5 already. So that's a pretty big deal. I think the coaches are doing a pretty good job with this poll, but maybe I would rotate them a little bit. We get to the next 5 and I'll talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to be too nitpicky on the top 5 because I think the teams are all very good. To be honest, I'm loving what we're looking at here in the bottom 5 of this top 5. Let's talk about it now. San Diego jumps into the top 10. Oh, the West Coast Conference, Mick. Let's take a minute now and tip our caps because in back-to-back days, the West Coast Conference pulls off massive, massive wins against the Pac-12 with LMU sweeping UCLA, jumping the Bruins out of the top 25, and then Pepperdine showing out. I was on the call. It was a fun weekend in Seattle. Pepperdine would end up losing to Northwestern after beating Washington. They will stay, and we'll talk about where Pepperdine sits here in a minute. I don't know if they necessarily got the due that they deserve, but it's a West Coast Conference, Mick, that is certainly jumped into our Power 5 rankings.
Well, I think they make it Power 6, don't you think? Because we have 4 teams there, more than some of the other Power 5 conferences have, that are beating up on people and scheduling. I give San Diego credit for their schedule this year. They were phenomenal in getting all the top teams to play, and we'll talk about the matches next week, but they're still battling. So they haven't had a rest. Pepperdine is showing that they can play with anybody. BYU, I wonder about, because they got swept 3-0, 3-0 this weekend. They didn't win a set. That's unusual for BYU, and maybe we've got them overvalued.
Maybe, but that's a tough trip, right? You got to go across the country. BYU's always known to having tough times when they play out of their own time zones, right? And you have to go to Atlanta. So I will give Olmstead's crew a little bit of leeway there. And of course, they're not in the top 10 anymore. They drop out of the top 10. Georgia Tech shows out with the sweep of BYU, but the fall to Ohio State has them drop from 5 to 7. And then Stanford jumps into the top 10. They've got a huge one here coming up this week. And Purdue dropped from 9 to 10. Purdue had the third set. They looked like they were going to force 4 in Louisville. And then the Cardinals and their fans came swarming back. What do you think about the Boilermakers?
Well, I think only that they're untested. I think the schedule has been designed to help get his team be good, but we really don't know how good Dave Shondel's team is. And it's because that he hasn't been scheduling the top group of teams yet, while he develops his players and probably spends a lot more time training in practice on getting better. So I keep Purdue in the middle of the pack of this 25, simply because I don't think they're tested yet. I want to see them go to battle. They got swept with Louisville 3-0, and, they didn't win a set. That bothers me a little bit because I think they need to be able to battle in those situations. So maybe they're not at that level yet. Maybe they're at the second group level.
Maybe, you know what? And the thing with me with the Big Ten, though, is I've never once concerned myself with the ranking before the conference season starts for them, because that they're going to have the toughest of competition. Teams like Illinois might continue to get some flack for staying ranked. But at the end of the day, if they have a great conference season, it's respectable. And a team like Northwestern, too. They went there and they beat Pepperdine in Seattle. They competed and won a set against Washington. Got to keep an eye on them. But once again, it doesn't really matter because they've got such a tough conference slate. There's no reason to put too much flack or too much of these hot takes on the non-conference season. But I want to say one thing. 2 Indiana transfers have stepped up very big, right? Brianna Edwards for San Diego has been huge. And then Blackwell as well. Huge coming from the Midwest and moving out west. San Diego, 5-set winner against Utah to end the weekend. That's got them in the top 10. All right, 11 through 15 here. And this is where I think there may be some big names. And once again, the 11 through 15 last week were our darlings. And Penn State jumps up 9 spots with their huge weekend in Minnesota. Were you able to catch any of Shoemaker Cawley's big match wins?
Yeah, I was absolutely awed by the fact that Penn State could play like that. I really had them off of the top 25 poll. They just totally destroyed the Pac-12 conference. And I don't know what to think. Evidently, Katie's got the kids playing hard and they're going. I got to watch them block. They're all over the net with the block. They really played well this weekend. I want to see if they can hold up under competition.
Mick, there are only 3 undefeated teams in our top 25. and that's Texas, Nebraska, and Penn State. A pair of 5-set wins in that Pac-12 Big Ten Challenge. They were up 2-0 against Stanford. The Cardinal came back, forced to fifth. Penn State held on, and then 15-9 in the fifth against Oregon, a team that Minnesota beat in 4 sets as well. And I don't know. I don't want to press any panic buttons if I'm on the Pac committee or any fans out there, but in my very straightforward opinion, the West Coast Conference has jumped over the Pac-12 Conference for the time being in terms of volleyball talent, the strength of their conference in RPI, and everything surrounding it. There's not one case you can give me that the Pac-12 Conference is better than the West Coast Conference right now, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's very interesting. So, how about the rest of the poll? What's it look like?
Yeah, so after Kentucky, and then you got Baylor and BYU there, 16 through 20 has Florida leading the way. They've got a fun one against Florida State on Tuesday night, so that might be tonight if you're watching us right away here on Tuesday. Creighton stays in it with the win over Florida State. They're sitting at 17. Washington drops all the way from 13 to 18. And to be honest, Mick, having watched the Huskies in person, they've got a lot to work through because they had a first set loss to Northwestern, and then Cal Poly, a team without a win, should have beaten Washington, forced to 5. The Huskies survived that cardiac canines that they know so well there. And Marquette at 19, Oregon at 20.
Did you work that match?
I did. Six matches in 2 days, Mick. It was a wild whirlwind of a weekend.
Amazing. Well, you got a good look at that. So what do we think about Washington?
They've got all the names, right? LMA Powell, and then Crenshaw in the back row with Bays the libero, and up in the front row, Hoffman and Grote and Ensley and all those all-conference and all-region and all-Americans. But if the passing isn't good, they struggle. And of course, that's the situation with everyone. But having a little extra pressure on Claire Hoffman to serve, receive consistently, it wasn't something that she necessarily did too well against Pepperdine, and then again against Cal Poly. They had moved her away from that for a moment. There's too much pressure on a player like Hoffman right now. She took 60 swings against Cal Poly. That's the most she had, I think, in her entire career. They'll work each other out because, I'm not sure there's anyone else in the Pac-12 that can compete with Stanford and Washington. So I have hope in Coach Cook, and I think that it's going to be them and Stanford atop. I'm not so sure that there's going to be more than one host, though, come NCAA tournament time in the Pac-12. That's what I'm going to say.
Sir, you cannot be in this area. This is employees only.
Sorry.
Oh, I love it. Oh, we're live, folks. We're not cutting this out. Mick's getting kicked out of the employee-only area of the winery.
The ladies, sir.
Phenomenal. I love it. We're letting this roll. Right. So Oregon's sitting at 20. They lost in 4 and lost in 5. Another situation where I think maybe the coaches are just hanging along teams that they know are talented, but they're scared to give someone a jump and bump another team out. Same with Illinois. As we take a look at our bottom 5 here, folks, this is phenomenal. This is live television, kind of, right? Western Kentucky at 21. They've got a good matchup with Tennessee this week. And then Pepperdine. Pepperdine's a team that is probably a lot better than their ranking sits, right? Because a loss to Northwestern could have potentially hindered a jump up into the top 15, but Northwestern is a good team. Just one loss this year to Washington. Keep an eye on Pepperdine. Rachel Ahrens is no longer playing 6 rotations, and she looks a lot smarter. She's not necessarily taking those 60 swings. She's giving you with the finesse. And this was my first time getting to watch Rachel as Mick continues to work his way to a legal zone over there in Michigan. But the combination of Grace Chillingworth, the freshman of the year in the West Coast Conference, with Emily Helmuth, a freshman, and Isabel Zelaya, the setter, got pulled in the 5th set against Cal Poly. They were down 11-5, and the freshman Rosemary Archer leads them back to beat Cal Poly 17-15 in the 5th. Oh, poor Mustangs, because the Big West is going to be very winnable this year for anyone up there. But Cal Poly to start 0-7, 0-8 is a tough pill to swallow for a team that is probably a lot more talented. And Coach Keegan Cook told me after their 5-set win that Cal Poly is the best 0-7 team that he's ever seen, which is hilarious. And then Mick, Kansas fell in their first match of the year to UNLV. They'll get a good matchup this week. We'll talk about them in a minute with the matches to watch. How about Arkansas? Welcome to the top 25 for the Razorbacks. Are you back with me, Mick?
I am back with you. And I'll tell you, I was impressed with the Razorbacks win over Washington earlier. But, I like the Razorbacks coach. I think he's been working hard to get that program going. I'm excited for him. I'm glad the coaches appreciated his effort and his team's effort.
Are you staying dry over there? It looks like it's a little wet.
No, I'm getting soaked in the rain here.
Folks, this is what we do for you.
But I'm like anybody else. I'm staying in the game.
And you're talking about Jason Watson, of course. He spent some time at head coach at BYU and then 8 years at Arizona State. He's made a big jump. They beat Washington on the opening week, and Arkansas has a fun one against Georgia Tech on Thursday. Mick, Illinois, they're just kind of hanging along like a loose snail, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I don't know why the coaches have so much clout for Illinois. I think they have to prove themselves, and they're running on fumes right now. Maybe it's the Big Ten coaches pushing them up to get an extra team in the tournament, but there are a lot of other teams that are really biting at their heels and deserve some consideration. So I think you ought to look at those also ran teams in the positions that Illinois is holding right now.
So let's go ahead and talk about some of these fun segments here before we get to our matches to watch. And I'm going to go snub of the week, UCF. UCF isn't even in the top 30. They aren't even in the first 5 receiving votes. They beat Miami. They beat UIC. They're 5-0. McKenna Melville, once again, just surprising teams. They beat Pepperdine in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year, lost to UCLA in the second in a crazy 5-setter. But UCF is going to have their chance come soon. I don't know when it's going to be, but hopefully they can get some respect. Rice is the 26th team, and then Towson, our upset of the week, jumps all the way up to 27. Towson didn't just beat Pittsburgh, Mitt. They embarrassed them. 25-12 in the first set. The back-to-back Colonial champs won it in 4. And this was with Pittsburgh's starting setter back, Lexus Akeo, who was running the 6-2 with Rachel Fairbanks. Are you hitting the panic button if you're Pitt, or are you waiting?
No, I think he's been pretty good about moving his players around. I think he's been pretty good about being patient with this and patient to get his setter back. I rank Pitt a lot higher. I just think I think they're playing a lot of players trying to get this going, but their talent looks like they're in the top 10.
And then our milestone of the week is a bit of a twofer. How about Travis Hudson winning his 700th match at the helm of Western Kentucky? They did it in a bit of a scare, didn't they? They were taken 5 by Northern Kentucky.
That was
Hudson.
Yeah, I thought 5 games there, but they have to have a letdown against the locals a little bit because they get up for all the big teams. So, and the locals are trying to replace the top dog there in the state. So I think Travis has got it going. He's got a big match coming this next week. We'll talk about that later. So we need to keep our eye on Western Kentucky.
Hudson, one of 10 active coaches with 700 wins. I think one of 4 that have done it all with the same program. And then Callie Bauer in that match got a triple-double. We love shouting out triple-doubles, the first for WKU since 2009. And so what we can do, and I'll give one more nod here, and I want to ask you which conference you thought was the most impressive besides the West Coast, because I think we can agree the WCC owned the week. How about the ACC? Some of the mid teams in that conference, obviously Louisville swept Purdue. Georgia Tech swept BYU. UNC, the first win of the year against Michigan State, Michigan State's first loss. So the first team opposing to take down Leah Johnson, and then Duke beats Michigan. So the ACC, especially those Tobacco Road schools, did well.
Yeah, I think the ACC is my number two conference right now. Sorry,
no, cracking up. It's hilarious. Mick's getting soaked.
I'm not giving up. I'm staying with this. All right. So I like ACC number 2. I like Big Ten number 1. I think you have to give Big 12 number 3 because of Texas. Those goes by. I think when you start talking about strength, I wonder where the Pac-12 is. I mean, I've got them down at 5 or 6 right now, and those guys got to shape up here and start putting it together.
Yeah, this will be a big week for the SEC, right? Because Kentucky got swept by Wisconsin. If Florida doesn't represent too well against Florida State tonight on Tuesday night, then things could get suspect. I'm putting the West Coast Conference right below Big 12. and then Pac-12, and then SEC. That's where I've got sitting right now, but it's all very fluid. And let's jump into our matches to watch here quickly, Mick. Tuesday, 7 o'clock, ESPNU, Florida against Florida State, the Sunshine State Showdown. I love it. I called it in the past. I've done it in the NCAA tournament. They're a great matchup. 1 year, Florida beat Florida State my sophomore year, and then the next year, Florida State came back and beat Florida in the NCAA tournament. And then Western Kentucky can debut themselves on the road in Knoxville at 6 o'clock Eastern on SEC Network Plus. But the premier one, Stanford at Nebraska. Who do you got? 8 o'clock on BTN.
Well, Stanford is just up and down. You know, you can't tell when those guys are going to play and when they're not. I think they'll get up for this game. They might beat Nebraska. You know, and then they'll turn around and not be able to score again. And they just drive me nuts watching them.
Well, I couldn't be more opposed. I was actually broadcasting last year's matchup in Stanford when the Cardinal beat up on Nebraska in 4. I'm thinking it's going the other way. I think Nebraska takes this in 3. A little bit of a chip on their shoulder for the win last year for Stanford. That was an unranked Stanford team, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 21-22. Nebraska came into the pavilion with Maples with a little bit of a swagger about them, and they got beat down pretty bad. I think you're going to return the favor in Devaney. Wednesday, battle for the I don't think it's the battle of the bluegrass, but it might as well be, right? Battle for Kentucky, a changeup, no longer on ESPNU. Now it'll be on ESPN 1 or 2 at 7 o'clock Eastern between Louisville and the Wildcats. Can UK muster up much at home for here against those fighting Cardinals?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to have a ticket in the front row for that. You know,
It'll be on ESPN.
I just think Craig Skinner has owned that state, and Danny Busboom Kelly has come in and kind of taken over. And it's the ACC versus the SEC. There's a lot going on this match. So
I love this. I love this Tuesday, this Wednesday, and then how about this Thursday? Thursday, it might be the best Thursday of the year because headlined by the Pepperdine at Minnesota match at 9 o'clock Eastern on Big Ten Plus. Texas is facing undefeated Houston, a matchup of undefeated Texas schools at 9 o'clock as well on Longhorn Network. BYU, Utah in the Holy War. Who do you got there at 9 o'clock?
Well, I don't know. I think Utah maybe pulls an upset here. BYU getting slapped 3-0, losing last weekend. They're going to be wanting to get back, but Utah is playing some very good volleyball on the fringes of the top 25. I think they want to make a name for themselves and get back up there.
Okay, I'm thinking BYU with a 5-set thriller, and then Utah turns around and takes on Utah State. That'll be a great matchup as well.
They need to watch out for that because Mike Wilton is a volunteer assistant for Utah State. He's bringing the power of Cal Poly back to those guys. And
they've been great. They beat UCLA, right? Tatum Stall is phenomenal out there on the outside. Keep an eye on Utah State. They are trying to head back to the NCAA tournament. And then Georgia Tech at Arkansas. Can Coach Watson do it one more time in Fayetteville? That would be a big one.
Say, this is his chance. This is Arkansas's chance to get on the big stage. If they can pull this off and really get Georgia Tech here, then people have to pay attention to Jason Steen, the Arkansas Razorbacks.
All right, now the weekend. Remember, 15,797 is the number to beat in the Kohl Center, and it looks like Wisconsin is confident they're going to do so. 8 o'clock Eastern on Big Ten Network against the University of Florida. That's a great one. UCF has their chance against Kansas too. Which one are you watching at the same time Friday night?
Well, I think I want to see Wisconsin, Florida. I want to see if Florida is real. I want to see if Wisconsin's real. I really don't know who those two teams are yet.
Well, go ahead.
And I'm going to tune into that one.
If Wisconsin can sweep Florida and Kentucky in the same week, that would be a big blow to the SEC. Of course, Arkansas can get back a little bit at the ACC on Thursday night, but the Badgers can certainly dictate our opinion of the SEC in one fell swoop. UCLA and San Diego, the Bruins have a chance at 10 o'clock Eastern time on Friday night to get a little payback there. And then I've got a sneaky couple ones here for you. I'm going to rattle them out. Mississippi State at Michigan. That could be a fun one, a chance for the Bulldogs to put together a pretty decent win. Howard and Penn State, one of those ones where they're familiar. They play in the NCAA tournament a lot. Watch out, Penn State might have a sleeper. And then Tennessee against Pitt is good. Western Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Long Beach State, LMU. The Big West is struggling right now in non-conference play with Hawaii losing to USC as well.
Yeah, but USC won the first one and then was up 2-0 on the second one. And Robin Moe's Rainbows came back and won in 5. So I tell you what, these knockouts of the Pac-12, I just don't get where they are right now. So as a conference, they have to be very careful. They have to start winning some of these matchups.
Well, maybe it's Saturday night, right? In Palo Alto, when Louisville has to travel across the country at 10 o'clock Eastern on Pac-12 Insider to face Stanford. That's going to be a great end of your Saturday. Georgia Tech and Georgia, both with 1 loss, Saturday at 7 o'clock. That'll be really good as well. Also got to keep an eye on an Indiana battle, Ball State and Purdue at 4 o'clock on Saturday in West Lafayette. And then Sunday, Ohio State and Pittsburgh is certainly the matchup that is tastiest, but then Nebraska at Kentucky, can the Wildcats represent pretty well? And Oregon, Miami, a bit of a threesome there, trio on Sunday.
Yeah, I like all those. And like you said before, I want to emphasize that UCLA's only chance to help the Pac-12 is to beat USD on Saturday night. And then Sunday, Pittsburgh's got to prove that they can play with their new setter.
All right, well, we've got some good interviews lined up for you folks in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. A big midweek jumble of matches. So if you're watching, hit us up on Twitter at 6 Rotations. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. Thank you so much for watching, as always.